Thanks, Chairman. Good evening, everybody, and you're all very welcome. Can you hear me there clearly, Carol?
All good, yeah.
Yeah. So look, I'm just going to spend a couple of minutes talking about the new TAMS grant for the solar PV, the process required to make the application, and just a few of the timelines around that. So, like, look, as farmers, we're all familiar with TAMS from the previous few years and the different grants that were available under the umbrella of TAMS. Solar was available previous to this under TAMS 2 up to 11 kilowatts at 40% of a grant rate. Under the new TAMS 3, the solar has a grant rate of up to 62 kilowatts with a max spend of €90,000. With TAMS 3, the solar has a separate investment ceiling than the other elements of TAMS. So, like, if you're planning on doing a slatted shed, your solar investment won't have any bearing on that ceiling of the 90,000. It's a separate ceiling. I suppose it's a lot more attractive grant now. 60% up to 62 kilowatts versus 40% up to 11 kilowatts in the old TAMS. And probably from what we're seeing around the ground, the majority of systems will need to be over the 11 kilowatts. I suppose in addition to the increase in the system size, a farmhouse consumption can now be included in the calculation. Look, at the house has to be associated with the yard. It has to be the farmhouse. Like, a house 2 mile away isn't going to work. For any reason, like, logistically, you're not going to dig a trench 2 miles across land to connect up your solar install. So, look, under the TAMS, the applicant must ensure that their system design is no bigger than your previous 12 months consumption. And that includes the house and the yard, if the house is suitable. There's been a change also in the exporting to the grid. Farmers can now be paid for any excess electricity that goes to the grid for, say, certain times a year. You may be producing more than you're fit to consume, so you will get paid for that by your electricity provider. But the department have kind of kept a lid on that by ensuring that your system size isn't greater than your previous 12 months consumption. There's no planning permission required for solar now under TAMS unless you're farming. There's 47 different safeguarding zones, the department call it. It's mainly around airports. They don't really want solar around that. And I suppose just moving on then quickly, Chairman, like when IFA and Board Gosh would be designing a system for farmers, like, there is a number of things we have to kind of take into consideration when we're out doing our surveys. I'll just go through a couple. Like, the panels have to go on the shed in the farmyard. You know, even if the house has been included, you cannot put the solar on the house itself. It has to go on a lean-to or an A-style roof. A round roof, as David mentioned earlier, won't be acceptable under TAMS. There has to be a 50 centimetre gap from each edge of the shed. Look, at a majority of sheds, it won't cause an issue, but if you are, say, trying to squeeze a lot of panels onto a smaller shed, you need to keep that 50 centimetres from the edge or you'll be ruled out of TAMS. Another issue, if you're putting solar on a roof with skylights, look, at a lot of sheds have skylights, you must put a safety cage under each skylight. And the skylight cannot be covered with a solar panel. So there is a few options there to get around that. Like, you could remove the space sheeting or the skylight sheet, sorry, and replace it with cladding. It may leave a neater install. You know, you won't have to navigate your way around you know, the skylight sheets, and it'll save the expense and the work of putting in safety gauges. Another point to note, under TAMS 2, any shed with an internal agitation point wasn't eligible for TAMS grant aid. This carries through to TAMS 3 and solar, even though, look, we can argue that solar is on the roof, it's not in the shed. We've questioned that with the department. It won't be tolerated under TAMS 3 for solar. So basically, if you have an internal agitation point, that shed could be perfectly south-facing, perfect, won't be allowed for TAMS. They will grant aid you to, say, put in an external agitation point, but look, we're not going to get into that just at the minute. So those are just a few of the things that we need to kind of look at when we're out doing our solar surveys. And, like, there is a lot of terms and conditions, and, you know, we don't want any farmer to lose out on the grant over small minor things kind of been just skipped over. Every installer has to be approved by the department. So there is a list of them available. So just moving on quickly, excuse me, Chairman, to the process of making an application. And like just to say before that, we are in constant communication with the department on different TAMS issues, and like some of the questions that was brought up here the other night, we put them to TAMS last week and we're meeting them again this week. So look, when we have that meeting over, we'll be fit to circulate all the questions and answers with just a few things we need to clarify. So the process itself, then a farmer can apply for TAMS himself, or he can engage his planner, whether it be a Teagasc or a private consultant. There is a few things a farmer needs to make the application. An energy survey is required, and this will be provided by your installer. It will have the system size proposed, and it will confirm that the applicant's previous 12 months is what he's actually designing the system around. And look, this is just the way the department of regulating that people aren't putting up a system that's far too big for what they actually need. A farm layout sketch with the proposed shed. Look, at anybody who done TAMS 2 for anything else, they know what I mean by a farm sketch. You know, a Google or Bing Maps device, and you have to mark the location of where the actual what shed the solar is going on. The detailed drawing at a scale of minimum 1:200, showing the locations of the panels on the roof, the distance from the edges, and the location of the inverter as well. So look, the current tranche open on the 22nd of February. It will remain open until midnight on the 16th of June. The next tranche, similar to TAMS 2, will open on the 17th of June. And look, the main issue at the minute probably with TAMS is that no application will be assessed until after the closing date of the tranche. So if you take 16th of June closing date, there'll be no application for TAMS solar looked at until probably the 17th of June, and you're looking at an 8 to 10 week lead-in time on approval. So anybody who goes in for TAMS solar now will be looking at probably mid to late August at the earliest when you have an approval. There's a budget set out for each tranche over the lifetime of TAMS. If it's the case that tranches are oversubscribed, the department may need to introduce a ranking system to see who makes the cut and who doesn't. So look, just bear that in mind. There'll be no guarantee that if you apply for TAMS that you'll be accepted in the first tranche. I just see a couple of questions coming in there. Batteries are included in TAMS at 60% as well. Just getting near the end now, Chairman, you know, it's useful to bear in mind that similar to TAMS 2, no work can be carried out prior to your approval date. It has to be, all invoices have to be dated post your approval date. So if you're approved on the 1st of September, you can get an invoice for your solar on the 2nd of September. Just to finish off, Chairman, it's very important if anybody is going to apply for TAMS through your planner, you know, get in contact with them now. You know, it's a very busy time of the year with BIS applications, and you know, it's a short enough window at this stage, so really you need to be getting working on it. So I'd just like to thank everyone for listening. If there's any questions on TAMS, pop them into the chat, or you know, contact us at IFA Solar. So that's it, Chairman. Thank you.